Hello and welcome to another episode of Addicted to Business. I can't believe I'm actually saying this. It's a huge, huge honour today to welcome our special guest, Mr. Guy Kawasaki. Hello, Guy. Lovely to have you, my friend. Thank you so much for joining us. This is absolutely mental. This podcast started like a year ago, and now we've got one of the biggest names on the talent and one of my biggest heroes. So hello and welcome. And before I forget, I must introduce Stokely, otherwise he'll have the hump. So welcome, Stokely, as well. Lovely to have you on.
Nathan sometimes forget to introduce me, Guy, but I am here, so don't worry. But thank you for myself as well. It's a pleasure.
I hope you're not psychologically scarred.
Okay. So, Guy, let's dive straight to it. The second I posted this on social media, it went berserk. I haven't had that much social coverage in a long time. For those that aren't familiar with your story, let's very quickly share with the audience your journey. So right from leaving school, university, and then kind of on from there, if you wouldn't mind, just to bring everyone up to speed with the modern day.
So I graduated from Stanford in the previous century. I went to law school for 2 weeks and hated it, so I quit that. I went back to the state of Hawaii, where I'm from, and worked for the lieutenant governor's office for the rest of the year. Then I went back to the mainland, and I went to UCLA to get an MBA. And while I was at UCLA, I worked part-time for, believe it or not, a jewelry manufacturer. And after I graduated from UCLA, I remained working at that jewelry manufacturer until I went to a small software company for about 6 months. And then I went to Apple as Apple's second software evangelist. So my job was to convince Mac companies or software companies to make Mac software and hardware.
Very cool.
What a career, Guy.
Yeah.
So tell us after that. So obviously you had some time at Apple, and that's amazing. And everyone kind of, when I talk about Guy Kawasaki, they say, is that the chap from Apple? What happened after that? Because you've had so many different jobs since then and done so many wonderful things.
Yeah, I just can't hold the job down. So after Apple, I started a few software companies. And today I'm chief evangelist of Canva. And I am a podcaster. I have a podcast called Remarkable People.
Very cool. Very cool.
Well, that's what I was actually going to talk to you about, actually, guys. As my next question, we'll jump the gun a little bit there. Remarkable People, great podcast, stars the likes of Gary Vee and Steve Wozniak and some other huge, remarkable people that this world has to offer us. Tell us a little bit about the podcast and how it started and what's it about to educate our listeners.
Well, the true story is that I recently released a book called Wise Guy, which is a collection of stories of my life. And when you introduce a book, you go on a lot of podcasts. And so I would ask these podcasters, how do you make money? And they say, well, I got about 250,000 subscribers. And so I sell advertising. I said, well, so how much do you sell the ads for? I said, well, the one that's at the start of the podcast is 25 grand. The one in the middle is 15 grand. The one at the end is 10 grand. So I'm adding up 25, 15, and 10, and I'm getting 40, 50 grand. Multiplying by 52, and I say to myself, why am I writing books and why am I traveling all over the world? I should just have a podcast. And so really that's the genesis of the podcast. And then I looked at, what could I do? So Remarkable People is not Remarkable Guy. And by that, I mean, this podcast is not about me. It's about the other person. And I have had guests like Jane Goodall, Margaret Atwood, Andrew Yang, Steve Wozniak, Steve Wolfram, Sean Thompson. I've had surfers. I've had business people. Yeah, I have had. In a rare moment of immodesty, I would say that I bet you I have maybe the best guest list in podcasting. So my job is to be in the background and bring out the remarkableness of my interviewee and the lessons that can apply so that other people listening to the podcast can become remarkable too.
That's
amazing.
I think, Guy, interesting for me is that you always do come across as so humble. And like you say, from writing the book and everything else, your journey is, you must have learned so much. And what I'm really interested to hear from you is that we have a whole range of people that listen to this podcast, right? All different ages, all different stages of their business journey. If Guy Kawasaki can go back to when he was 18 years old, but with the knowledge you've got now, what do you tell yourself to do differently?
Don't quit Apple.
Brilliant.
Yeah, because listen to this. So, people are now like, they're hanging up on this podcast because they're like, so that dumb shit, he quit Apple. So I not only quit Apple, I quit Apple twice, and I turned Steve down for a third job. And if I had not done any of those three stupid things, well, Nathan, honestly, I would not be on your podcast right now. So,
that makes you so remarkable, I guess.
Yeah, $250 million here, $250 million there. It adds up after a while.
Yeah. So, aside from Apple, of course, that's one thing. What else would you have changed, or what else would you tell your younger self?
I would probably take a computer science class or two, not because I would want to be a programmer or engineer, but because that way I can tell when programmers and engineers are lying to me, which I have come to believe is when their lips are moving. But it'd be good to know with greater detail when they're lying and how they are lying.
Is that a common problem in the world of Silicon Valley?
It's a common problem anywhere there are engineers. Are you kidding me? Although I'm not saying that marketers don't lie either. Don't get me wrong.
I want to talk to you a little bit more about Steve Jobs.
Yes.
This is a great opportunity to do this from a guy that works so closely with him. I watched your, I think it was your TEDx video on YouTube about you talking about the lessons learned from Steve. For people that haven't watched that video, could you tell us a little bit more about him and a little bit, some secrets?
Yeah, so basically everything you heard or read or seen about Steve Jobs is true. He was very difficult, very demanding. And yet, if you want to focus on the negative side of that, that's what you would take away. The positive side is he probably, he definitely dented the universe, and I would not be where I am were it not for Steve Jobs. So I think as you look back on your life, if you're honest, you say to yourself that the people who were the hardest on you taught you the most. And, I mean, if you've ever watched Gordon Ramsay's special, you kind of know what it's like. But I mean, I would argue that probably Gordon Ramsay has made those people into better chefs. Yeah, and Steve Jobs definitely made me into a better evangelist.
What was he like? What was he like on a day-to-day basis then to work with? Did he do your head in a little bit?
Well, there's a lot of HR theories about how you should focus on the positive, and you should develop mutual goals, and all this kind of stuff, all the touchy-feely kumbaya hot yoga stuff. But I'll tell you something, Steve Jobs ruled by fear. I mean, you were basically afraid that he would rip you in public. And contrary to every HR theory, fear is a very powerful motivating factor in the workplace.
That's in terms of Steve's positive, like we talked a little bit there about the negatives, and like we say, there's some things that are maybe seen as negative but actually very positive, and like you said, it made a remarkable dent on the world. What are the couple of things you really remember that stick with you that Steve did while you're working with him that you go, that was a great life lesson?
Well, I mean, I definitely learned that your current customers can't tell you how to revolutionize your business. They can only tell you how to make what you already are selling better, faster, and cheaper. And so it's very dangerous to think that, let's say you're a car manufacturer, right? And you ask your current car owners, what do they want? Well, I mean, some of them, they're going to tell you, well, we want bigger engines, faster, bigger, heavier things. Some are going to tell you lower mileage, higher mileage, smaller cars, et cetera, et cetera. But if you think about it, back when Tesla was just starting, who from Ford, Chevrolet, BMW, Audi, who of those customers would have told you, I want an electric car? Nobody would have told you that. And so you can't necessarily ask your current customer how to revolutionize the business.
That's
wow,
really
such a
thing to take away. In terms of, I see a lot of the work you're doing now as being an ambassador or an evangelist. What are those roles in really simple English? We've got people here, and even myself to extent, going, what does that even entail? What do you do? So let me ask you this, right? Like, with all respect,
Well,
what do you do in those roles?
Well, as a Mercedes-Benz brand ambassador, basically I get to drive any Mercedes I want. I make appearances for them, and that's it. So, it's a good job if you can get it. It took me 40 years to get there. Now, there's the other kind of brand ambassadors for Mercedes are like Roger Federer, Michael Horn, an Explorer, the woman who's the first F1 driver. And the thinking is, if Roger Federer drives a Mercedes and he's the world's greatest tennis player, I should drive a Mercedes too.
Yeah.
I don't know if that applies to me, but that's the thinking. Now for Canva, I am chief evangelist. So, that's brand ambassador for Mercedes is kind of icing on the cake, but chief evangelist for Canva is the cake. And Canva is an online graphic design service that enables people to create beautiful designs effortlessly.
Okay,
Wow.
so for Canva, you're out actively promoting when you're doing talks and things like that. You're talking about Canva, its capabilities, and therefore people are associating you with Canva, if you like, and saying, well, if Guy's prepared to endorse it, it must be a great product based on your career.
That's the theory.
And are you doing any evangelism with other brands as well, or just Canva and then the brand ambassador piece at Mercedes?
That's about it. I'm on the board of a few companies, and I advise this company called Merge 4, the number 4.
Okay.
And Merge 4 makes the least boring socks and masks in the world. If you want cool socks, go to Merge 4. And all we need to get is 1% of the feet in the world, and we will be a huge success. So.
Love that.
Wow. You talked a little bit about your book earlier, but actually to our listeners who don't know, you've wrote 15 books to my knowledge. Is that correct?
Yes. Well, I wrote one book 15 times, some people say.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Some of these books have been on Wall Street and New York Times bestsellers.
Yeah.
How has apart from other things, how has being an author helped build your credibility, Guy?
Well, that's a trick question in a sense. There is no doubt that having written books that have been popular, it has led to business, and it has led to positioning and credibility, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But I hesitate to say that because I think that the reason to write a book is because you have something to say, and that a book is an end and a goal in and of itself. Most people who write a book see the book as a means to an end. So if you're Joe Blow and you have a company called Blow Consulting, you write a book called The Blow Away because you think by having a book called The Blow Away that people are going to hire me for consulting, they're going to hire me for speaking, they're going to think of me as a thought leader. So it's not that you had anything in particular you had to say or that you wanted to improve the world with your book. The book for you was just a means to an end. And I think that is a bullshit reason to write a book.
So you're saying you need, you should write it for the right reasons by having something to say rather than just going after the credibility and everything else.
Exactly. Well, let's face it. Most books, the existence of a book is not necessary or sufficient to be credible.
Just because it's a book, just because you have a book,
Yeah.
It could absolutely be rubbish that's inside of it, couldn't it?
I would say it's highly probable.
I'm interested to know, one of the big topics we talk to people about when we're talking about entrepreneurship and taking that leap forward is not being afraid to ask. And sometimes, certainly in society today, so many people are hung up on that fear of rejection, and therefore they don't go out and ask questions and they don't go out and reach out for help.
Yeah.
I'm interested from a personal point of view to know 7 years ago when I started my business, I was 18 and I was following this guy called Guy Kawasaki, and I reached out to you and you replied, right? I must have messaged quite a few people at that time, but actually something stuck and you messaged, and I've never forgotten that. I'm really interested for the listeners today, not only for me to say thank you, but also for those to say, you should absolutely reach out. You should absolutely go and make it happen and go and kind of bring the world to you. But why did you reply? Is that something you do for everyone, or did something just stick? Like, why was it?
Well, I clearly recognize your great potential. Basically,
Not as good looks then.
Yeah, honestly, I try to reply to every sort of, reasonable email. Now, there are some emails that, it starts off with "Dear Gary," right? So I blow those off.
That's a punch in the teeth.
Yeah, and then there are some that say, "I loved your book, Rich Dad Poor Dad," and my response is, "You're a freaking idiot," because I didn't write that
Wrong
book.
guy.
Yeah, because all Japanese sound alike, and so. But my father in particular brought me up with the concept of noblesse oblige, which is to say that, if you're lucky and you're successful, you have a moral obligation to help others. Now, I can't tell you that my record is 100%, but I try. And, over the course of my career, I've noticed that it pays off. So, I believe that there's a karmic scoreboard in the sky, and that, you should make sure you have enough karmic points, because now this is a really weak argument for Christianity and believing in God, but, eternity is a long time. So even if you're not sure if God exists, man, like, why take a chance? So I know it's not supposed to be quid pro quo where you do good things and then you have a good afterlife, but just in case that's how it works, why take a chance, right?
Yeah, good point.
I mean,
good point.
do you think if there's a God, man, I would hate to be Donald Trump. I mean, let's
Let's hope there's no God out there for him.
Yeah, that trend is not his friend. So
no, I think it's a really good point. I think for anyone listening, that's the one takeaway I really wanted people to take is actually we're there to inspire, right? As business owners and leaders, we're there to inspire. And for us to be able to get Guy Kawasaki on our podcast after going 1 year just shows you that anything is possible, and actually stop the self-limiting beliefs. Stop the fact that you can't do this or you can't do that because of whatever. Just go out and make it happen. Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? Guy's going to not reply, or he's going to tell me to go away. But actually, he very kind of gave up his time, and here we are today.
Here we are. But first of all, it ain't that big a deal to get me on your podcast, okay? I mean, you may
dumb it down.
I am not Michelle Obama, okay? So
it's on next week. We've got Oprah. Oprah's my dream person. If Oprah's listening to this, which I'm sure she is, I would love to get Oprah on the show.
Oh, if Oprah's listening, I'd love to get her on my podcast too, just FYI. But I think one of the things, it's a strange world. So I've been in the Valley evangelizing and doing what I think is good work for about 30 years. And so what I learned is that it's not who you know, it's who knows of you. And so I may not know many of these people, but a couple of years ago, the woman who runs the Palo Alto TEDx reaches out to me. I don't know who she is. And she says, well, I would like you to moderate a fireside chat. And the other guest is Jane Goodall. Okay, so I'm saying to myself, are you shitting me? You want me to have a fireside chat with freaking Jane Goodall? Like, that fireside chat cost me tens of thousands of dollars because I turned down a paid speaking engagement in order to be on stage with Jane Goodall. Because at the end of my life, I'm probably not going to say, oh man, your life would have been perfect if you had done that one more speech. I think there's much greater argument to be said. Guy, you appeared on stage with Jane Goodall. I mean, how many people can say that? So then Jane and I really hit it off. And then, so she was the first guest on my podcast. And this morning, I moderated a conference for her where she's in the UK and I'm here, and there's people in Gombe and Tanzania and I don't know, Uganda. And, I appeared with her again. And so, that's a lesson. about asking. And the other thing is, let's just say that when the first guest on your podcast, like the first remarkable person on Remarkable People, is Jane Goodall, it gets easier, you know? Like,
that's the tone, right?
yeah, like when you can call anybody up or email anybody and say, well, I have a podcast called Remarkable People. It features people like Jane Goodall. So if you want to be on the same podcast as Jane Goodall, let me know. And if not, well, you know, go pound salt. But so that helps. And so then you get Jane Goodall, then you get Margaret Atwood, and you get Wozniak, and you get Steve Wolfram, and you get, you know, Sean Thompson, and then you get Ariana Huffington, and then you get, I mean, Martha Stewart, and then pretty soon it gets easier and easier. Now, having said that, listen, I would love to get Michelle Obama. I'd love to get Richard Branson. I'd love to get Desmond Tutu. You know, there are some people that are beyond me, but
all in good time.
doing all right.
All in good time. Oh, you touched a little bit there about your family and that your family kind of taught you with that concept. Who's been your biggest motivator in your career? Or your biggest inspiration, if you like?
Well, it's hard to top Steve Jobs, right? I mean, not that I aspire to be another Steve Jobs, because there's some aspects of him that don't appeal to me. But you know, certainly him. And you know, my wife has been a driving force throughout my life and career. So I have a theory that behind every successful man is an amazing and amazed woman.
Yeah.
So as a role model for many people around the world, and
God,
many of our listeners, don't worry, this isn't a difficult question.
Yeah, like, you mean like Charles Barkley?
Yeah, exactly right. I'm keen to know what's up, what's coming up for Guy Kawasaki. I mean, what's in the pipeline? You've done so much, but I'm sure you're a guy. I'm sure you're a guy, no pun intended, that can't stop, right? So what's next?
Well, I'm 66 years old, and I really started my career with Apple. I'm ending my career with Canva, so you know that's a pretty good bookend. And if you measured if you watched me and clocked me, the two things I spend the most time doing are my podcast and surfing. So I take a break from surfing to work. So I just love surfing. And I started surfing at 60. I'm 66 now. And
Wow.
Let's just say that starting at 60 surfing is a little late. Okay. So I do not recommend anybody starting surfing at 60.
Did you pick up some skills and tips from Sean Thompson?
Sean Thompson, tell you a funny story. So once I was in Santa Barbara at the Santa Barbara Apple store, because my son, he cracks his iPhone case screen once a month. So we're doing our monthly iPhone screen replacement. And I'm in the Santa Barbara Apple store, and I'm sitting with a genius. And this guy comes up to me and he says, "Are you Hawaiian?" I said, "Nope, I'm not Hawaiian." He goes, "Well, but you really look like Guy Kawasaki." I said, "I am Guy Kawasaki. I'm just not Hawaiian. I'm Japanese American." So he starts laughing, and the genius, and he goes, "Hi, I'm Sean Thompson." And this is just when I started surfing. So I don't know who Sean Thompson is. So the genius says to me, "You know who he is?" I said, "Nope." I goes, "He's Sean Thompson." I go, "I don't know who Sean Thompson is." Sean Thompson was, the world's greatest surfer in the 70s and 80s, right? And so he's like the Kelly Slater of the 70s. And so I said, wow. So then we start talking. Then he says, "Okay, I'm going to take you surfing." So I swear to God, Sean Thompson took me surfing. Not even Sean Thompson could get me to be able to stand on a surfboard. And so, but we've become fast friends now. And so that's another lesson about, you meet the coolest people in an Apple store. Now, I guarantee you that if I had been in the Microsoft store, I would not have met Sean Thompson. So that's another lesson in how you pick your opera system determines the arc of your life.
Huge podcast for Apple. Guy, I'm interested to hear, so many people talk about Silicon Valley and a lot of people dream or aspire to go there. I'd like to hear some stories about Silicon Valley. Just tell us a bit more about it. What is it like? Is it what it's all cracked up to be? Yeah.
I mean, It is and it isn't. And I have to tell you, you know the HBO series Silicon Valley?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The reason why
it.
that is so funny is because it is so true. I mean, it is like that. I mean, it's a little push to be funny, but it's pretty spot on to how Silicon Valley is, for better or for worse. And yet, you know, basically we view the world as half full, not half empty. We believe we can all dent the universe. We're fundamentally delusional optimists. And that's how it is. And that has empowered, you know, the creation of some great companies. So it really is a fantastic place. Now, you know, right now we're in the whole thing about Facebook and, you know, it's advertising and it's kind of neutrality on truth and that kind of stuff. But I mean, you know, if like you can't put social media back in a bottle, so we just have to deal with it. But Silicon Valley is a great place. Now, having said all that about the wonderfulness of Silicon Valley, I'll tell you something. This pandemic has changed everything because right now, everybody's just a little box on a Zoom chat, and you know, who the hell knows who the hell you are and where you are. So right now, I could make the case that the pandemic is a great flattening force where you used to say, well, you need to be in the valley for the connections and the, you know, contacts and serendipity and, you know, all the venture capitalists playing golf with you and all that other bullshit. But right now, none of that's happening. So you could make the case that it's a great leveling and you're either good on Zoom, pitching your company and pitching your product or service, or you're not. But it's not because you're within 1 mile of Sand Hill and somebody else is in Sydney, Australia.
So, Guy, I'm interested on the topic of Silicon Valley. A lot of people listening would go, I would love to go to Silicon Valley, but I don't know where to start. For anyone that is listening but actually needs that little kick up the bum to go or to go and make it happen, how would someone get started over in the Valley? Like, is there a particular place to start or a particular group to attend? Like, how does it work?
I would make the case that you don't need to go to Silicon Valley to make it work. Because of the pandemic and because everything is virtual and web conferencing and all that. So, you know, if your idea is a piece of shit, it's a piece of shit, whether it's in Croatia or Sydney or Silicon Valley. A piece of shit is a piece of shit. So the key is not about where your piece of shit is. The key is don't make a piece of shit. So that's the hard part.
I'm gonna write that one down, Guy.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, Canva is just freaking gold. So I'll give you the theory of Guy's golden touch. So Guy's golden touch is not what I touch turns to gold. Guy's golden touch is whatever is gold Guy touches. And so Canva is gold. So I touched it. I didn't make Canva successful. Arguably, Canva might make me successful. But the key here is that, you know, if you have something as good as Canva, nobody ever asks, well, you know, Canva's in Sydney, Australia, and half their team is in the Philippines, so I won't invest in it, I won't use it, I won't, you know, blah, blah, blah. Just make something great, man. That's the hard part. And then the world will come to you, or at least to your Zoom conference.
So I'm interested to hear about actually quite a personal topic, but a lot of people, confidence is massive, right? And actually as a generation, a lot of people are low on confidence for whatever reason, whether it be social media, whether it be people, or whatever it is. For some reason, society today is at rock bottom. I'm interested to know, even as Guy Kawasaki, and people may put you on this pedestal, do you still have those low days and those moments of insecurity and those kind of doubts even now?
Well, if you saw me surfing, you would understand self-doubt and incompetence. You know, yeah, I mean, I worry constantly. I'm kind of, and I mean this in a positive way, I am kind of obsessive compulsive. And so, you know, I'll give you an example of my OCD-ness. So do you see how my face is in focus and the stuff behind there is not in focus? It's like all bokeh out and there's a very shallow depth of field. So I'll move aside here, okay? So now what's behind there is in focus. And you see a shelf of books, you see a wooden box that held a Japanese vase, you see a little Buddha, and you see some LEDs. Behind that, you see all black. That all black are acoustic tiles, okay?
Yeah.
So the reason that my video is 20 times better than your piece of crap video is because I'm OCD and you're using FaceTime or a built-in camera, or you're using Logitech, and I'm using a Sony with a 50mm lens that's set up for the express purpose of my face in focus, everything out of focus is depth of field. And I probably spent 50 to 75 hours making this all work. Okay? And so that's what it takes. That's what it takes.
It's nice to hear that actually, yeah, it doesn't matter how big or successful or whatever you feel like you may become, actually, even then you still get those doubts. And actually what makes it, I've been watching the Michael Jordan documentary. I don't know if you've seen it.
No.
I just love the fact that even Michael Jordan, like even he, the greatest basketball player arguably of all time, actually still has those moments of self-doubt. And boy, does he put the work in. And that's the thing, right? The reason he's at the top is because he's prepared to work harder than anyone else. And that's,
I mean, exactly. So if Michael Jordan, and I am not Michael Jordan, but if Michael Jordan and Guy Kawasaki didn't have self-doubt, then we wouldn't be OCD. And, you know, he would not have spent, I don't know, 2 hours every day just shooting free throws where everybody else was in the locker room jiving, right? And so, and for me, the same thing applies to surfing. So I do a lot of off-water training for surfing. Then most people who started surfing at 60, who, you know, they don't do that. For them, it's just kind of a, you know, every once in a while. But for me, it's an obsession. And so that's what it takes. And I don't, this concept that, oh, that person is a natural or whatever, don't get me wrong, there are some naturals, but whether it's speaking or surfing or podcasting, my success is attributable to the willingness to grind it out, not because it came easy to me.
love that. Mentorship, guys, a topic I'd just like to touch upon. Have you ever been mentored? And do you now mentor others?
Mentored? I've been mentored twice. Once by a person in the jewelry business, and once by the general counsel of Apple. And so, yes, they were very instrumental in helping me survive and learn, you know, all this kind of stuff. Yes, I believe in it, but I never do it.
Okay, you don't mentor others now. And just because you don't have time, or like you say, you just...
Well, I don't have time, and I don't have patience, and I don't have sort of the correct bedside manner, you know, like, you know, all the positivity and all that stuff, and, you know, all the like yoga kind of kumbaya stuff. I'm just like, you know, people ask me if I will review their pitch. I say, okay, so I'll review your pitch, but I'm telling you, I'm going to rip it to shreds. Are you ready for that? And they all say, yeah. And then I rip them to shreds and they get all depressed. Like, you know, what? Like, here's a quarter, call your mama. I mean,
you're in the business world now.
Yeah, what do you want from my life?
So, but the final question for me, Guy, first of all, it's been a pleasure to have you on, but for our listeners today, if you could give 3 tips to a successful entrepreneur journey, if there is such a thing, what would it be? What would it be and why?
Okay, so tip number 1 is focus on creating a customer. The purpose of a company is to create a customer. Many people think the purpose of a company is to raise money and make you rich. Well, if you create a customer, you will probably make money and be rich. But if you don't create a customer and all you try to do is be rich, you'll probably fail. So it all comes down to creating a customer. The offshoot of that is, well, what does it take to create a customer? Well, duh, you got to make something great. And so, you know, focus on the prototype and getting it out there. And the third thing is eat what you kill, especially today. And by that, I mean that many people create an infrastructure and a spending level based on what they think they're going to kill. So, you know, because you're the first company in the history of man to ship your software on time, and you're the first company in the history of man where it's going to be immediate adoption, you created infrastructure, support structure, you know, all this kind of stuff based on the fact that your software will be on time and just wildly successful. Well, guess what? You're late and your software sucks. Meanwhile, you have the infrastructure and the cost structure. So what I'm telling you is eat what you kill, not what you plan to kill. And like a lot of people think, oh my God, but if I eat what I kill, I'm going to kill so much, I won't be able to eat it. Well, let's just say that's a very high quality problem. I have never seen it be the case. So don't flatter yourself. I've never seen a company die because it could not scale fast enough. I've seen many companies die because it scaled too early.
Sound wisdom, Guy. Thank you. Just on behalf of everyone listening, and certainly my Stokely and I, it's been a huge honor to have you on the show. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Okay, so now everybody go subscribe to my podcast, okay? It's at remarkablepeople.com. In particular, if you're an entrepreneur, you should listen to the podcast of Steve Wozniak, Bob Cialdini, who's the godfather of influence, David Acker, who's the godfather of branding. Those three alone would merit you listening to the podcast.
Right, thank you. Thank you so much.
Go listen to the podcast.
Listen to the podcast, follow Guy on socials. Guy, we can't thank you enough for everybody listening and watching. I hope you found it useful, and we look forward to being on the next show. Thanks again.
And I expect you to have better video next time, okay?
We will, we promise.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye-bye.